My name is Rachel, and I am a political affairs ambassador for the Borgen Project. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the Borgen Project, why the U.S. needs to do more to combat global poverty, and how you can join the fight to end global poverty. There are currently roughly 689 million people worldwide living in poverty. Furthermore, due to the pandemic, poverty levels are rising at rates higher than we've seen in decades. It is estimated that between 143 and 163 million more people will be forced into poverty this year. Most people believe that 25% of the U.S.'s budget goes to international aid, but in reality, it's less than 1%. Borgen Project is a nonprofit organization that is fighting to end global poverty. They are an advocacy organization that strives to advocate, educate, and mobilize to make poverty a focus of U.S. foreign policy and improve the living conditions of those that live on less than $1 a day. Beyond the moral reasoning, there are many reasons why we as Americans should care about global poverty and encourage our representatives in Congress to support foreign aid legislation. First, by boosting the global economy, we can boost our own economy. When people exit poverty, they become new consumers in the market. Essentially, a new market emerges along with a new consumer class. This creates a need for increased exports from the U.S., which creates a need for more jobs in the U.S. In fact, upward of 50% of our exports now go to emerging markets that formerly had no consumer class. Second, global poverty is a national security issue. Poverty and hunger force people into desperate situations. Poverty also leads to instability and war. Some of the world's most dangerous countries are also among the poorest. Thus, by providing foreign aid to those countries, the U.S. can aid in getting people out of poverty and desperate situations, which helps to stabilize countries and protect the U.S.'s national security interests. Most importantly, however, the U.S. should provide aid and do more in the fight against global poverty because they can. They have the resources to prevent hunger, poverty, and death. So how does the Borgen Project operate? They operate at the political and grassroots level. They work to build relationships with congressmen and women so as to garner support for crucial life-saving programs and anti-poverty legislation. They do this both by meeting with congressional leaders in person as well as mobilizing people to contact their congressional leaders. The Borgen Project teaches people how to call and email Congress in support of foreign aid legislation and programs. It may be surprising, but this is an effective way to get your congressional leaders to support legislation. In fact, if you get as few as a dozen people to call or write their representatives in support of a bill, they are far more willing to support that bill. Next, I'm going to discuss some of the Borgen Project's successes and the current anti-poverty legislation that they are advocating for. The Borgen Project and its volunteers and supporters have been crucial to getting important poverty reduction bills signed into law. Among these are the Malala Yousafzai Scholarship Act, which helps women and girls in Pakistan gain access to higher education, the Global Fragility Act, which helps to prevent violence worldwide by focusing on diplomatic development and security efforts that target the root causes of violence, and the End Neglected Tropical Diseases Act, which increases research and treatment for neglected tropical diseases, which are the cause of death for nearly 500,000 people a year. Another key piece of legislation that the Borgen Project played a role in getting signed into law is the Electrify Africa Act. The overall goal of the act was to more than double access to electricity in sub-Saharan Africa, to spur economic growth and development, and combat poverty. Of those who co-sponsored the act, 25 of them co-sponsored after meeting with Borgen Project volunteers, and 13 co-sponsored after receiving emails from Borgen Project constituents in their district. Of those who voted yes on the act, 75 had met with Borgen Project volunteers, and 78 had received emails from Borgen Project constituents in their district. The act was signed into law in 2016 by the Obama administration. So far, the act has been very impactful. As of January 2019, over 58 million people in sub-Saharan Africa have gained access to electricity. There are currently 5 pieces of legislation that the Borgen Project is advocating for. The first is emergency funding for COVID-19 global response. At the current rate of vaccine rollout in low-income countries, it will be years before everyone is vaccinated, which increases the possibility of more variants and will force more and more people into poverty. As part of this response, the Borgen Project believes that Congress should support a coordinated COVAX initiative to globally distribute vaccines and create a plan to share the 533 million vaccines we will have in excess after every American is vaccinated. It is essential that the U.S. help the rest of the world combat COVID if we want to eradicate it. The next piece of legislation that the Borgen Project is currently advocating for is the Global Health Security Act. This act would increase the U.S. government's effort to support epidemic and pandemic preparedness and prevent threats of infectious disease outbreaks. The third act is the Girls Lead Act. The pandemic has forced many girls out of school and created a greater risk for an increasing number of child marriages. In response to this trend, the Girls Lead Act would implement measures to increase adolescent girls' participation in democracy, human rights, and governance, which would help increase the number of girls in school, decrease violence against women, and drive economic growth worldwide. The fourth act is the Reach Every Mother and Child Act. This act would strengthen the U.S. government's effort to end preventable deaths of mothers, newborns, and young children in developing countries. Finally, it is important that the international affairs budget, which funds important development and diplomacy programs worldwide, is protected, and that Congress continues to increase its funding in each fiscal year in order to reduce poverty and protect U.S. interests. There are many ways to get involved in the fight against global poverty. The easiest way to get involved and join the fight to end global poverty is by calling and emailing your representatives in Congress and asking them to support key poverty reduction legislation, such as the 5 pieces of legislation I mentioned before. To email your representatives, you can use the link in the slide. It's super easy. You just select the issue you want your representatives to support. For example, right now the Girls Lead Act is before Congress. This act would implement measures to increase adolescent girls' participation in democracy, human rights, and governance. Next, you type your address and your representatives in Congress will be listed next to a fully written email asking them to support the legislation. Feel free to edit the message if you like, but if not, all you have to do is click Send Message and your message will be sent to your representatives. You can also call your congressional leaders and ask them to support specific legislation. Each of your representatives should have websites that list the phone numbers for both their district and DC offices. Feel free to call either or both. What you say is very simple, and if you aren't sure what to say, the Borgen Project has examples on their website. For example, if you want your congressional leaders to support the Global Health Security Act, all you have to say is, "Hello, I'm a Borgen Project supporter, and I would like you to support the Global Health Security Act." The more you call and email, the more likely your representative is to look seriously into the legislation and support it. You can also mobilize your friends to call and email Congress. There are many ways you can get involved with the Borgen Project. The Borgen Project is currently hiring for the following volunteer positions: Regional Director, Advocate, Writer, Guest Contributor, and Volunteer Editor. The main role of the Regional Director is to be a Borgen Project ambassador. Mobilize your friends, family, and colleagues to lobby Congress in support of important poverty reduction legislation. As an advocate, you build awareness for global poverty and represent the Borgen Project in your city. As a writer, you write an article a week for the Borgen Project's blog and magazine. As a guest contributor, you send in articles that you would write surrounding global issues. And as a volunteer editor, you would review and edit articles submitted by the Borgen Project's national team of writers. Each of these positions has many responsibilities. The ones listed on the slide are just the main aspect of the position. If you are curious about learning more about any of these positions, you can visit borgenproject.org/volunteer-opportunities/. Another way to get involved is through their internships. All internships are unpaid and 12 hours a week. If you are selected for the internship of your choice, you can begin in whatever month you choose. They have a wide variety of internships, each of which has special focus areas and many responsibilities. The focus area of the Human Resources Internship is on national recruitment and teaching the basics of human resources management, recruiting and selection, and staff training and development. The main role of the Nonprofit Leadership Internship is to give an insight into the key skills required to develop a nonprofit organization. The main responsibility of a political affairs intern is to fundraise, meet with congressional leaders, lead public and political outreach in your state, mobilize, educate others about global issues and the Borgen Project, and network on behalf of the Borgen Project. The main responsibility of a public relations/marketing intern is to get involved in a variety of the aspects of marketing and communications. And finally, the main responsibilities of a journalist is to write an article a week for the Borgen Project's magazine. Again, what is listed above is just an overview of the internship, but through the 12-week internship, there are many other tasks interns are required to complete. Each internship requires an application and an interview. If you want to learn more about any of the internships, you can visit borgenproject.org/telecommute-internship/. If you have questions specifically about the political affairs internship, feel free to email me at rachbark@umich.edu. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me. If you have any questions regarding the Borgen Project, feel free to email me at rachbark@umich.edu or check out the Borgen Project's website at www.borgenproject.org.